So last week marked the 13th anniversary for one of the worst events to occur on American soil. And we remember this day as Patriots' Day. Our next speaker was present in Washington, D.C. on that fateful day, September 11th, 2001. 2 days after those attacks, he was featured in many media outlets when he was involved in the recovery of our United States Marine Corps flag. Video.
At the Pentagon today, September 13, 2001, in a rare moment of inspiration and hope, a United States Marine Corps flag was recovered from the fourth floor office, just a few meters from the point of the plane's impact. The flag was recovered by Major Dan Pantaleo, a United States Marine officer and a crew of recovery workers. Amazingly, the flag was completely untouched and unscathed by the destruction and devastation that occurred around it. At the time the flag was recovered, Senator Tom Daschle and the Speaker of the House, Representative Dennis Hastert, were visiting Ground Zero at the Pentagon. Let's listen in as Major Pantaleo briefs the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert.
Mr. Speaker, how are you, sir? I'm Major Dan Pantaleo.
Major,
we've met one other time before.
Right.
I was working with Dan Gable with the...
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Right. Good to see you.
Anyway, sir, it's good to see you again.
Pleasure.
I wanted to bring this Marine Corps flag to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. It stood up there in stubborn defiance to what happened here, and I think it symbolizes all that's great about America. So,
you just brought it out. Thank you. Did a great job. Where'd you wrestle?
Small little private school in Michigan, sir. Olivet College.
Oh, I know Olivet well.
Yes, sir.
Great. Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
For the job you're doing.
Yeah,
really
thank you for being here, sir.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He's an author, business executive, retired Marine Corps officer, and a public speaker. His 20-year career in the Marine Corps is punctuated by his service at the Pentagon during the attacks on September 11th. His highly successful book, 4 Days at the Pentagon, details many of the recovery efforts that occurred at the Pentagon and serves as a template for leadership action in crisis situations. The proceeds from the sale of this book are donated to the Wounded Warrior Regiment. So, ladies and gentlemen, Major Dan Pantaleo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolute honor for me to be here. What a great venue this is to discuss heroism. It takes many different shapes and forms, and I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share a little bit of my story with you. I'm blessed to be able to travel the United States and speak to different audiences. I talk about leadership, I talk about paradigm shifts, but I always weave in my story about what occurred at the Pentagon for me at 9/11, the 4 days that I spent there leading the recovery efforts. It's come to help define who I am as a person. It tested my mental, moral, and physical leadership capabilities, and I believe it helps also define us as Americans in many ways. To start this off, I want you to know that you have a date with destiny. Everyone out here will experience a date in the future where you will have your own crisis that you'll have to work through. The Pew Research Center says that 95% of all Americans will experience between 3 to 5 major paradigm shifts or crisis situations in the course of their lifetime. 3 to 5 major paradigm shifts in the course of their lifetime. These paradigm shifts and crisis situations rock you to the core. There will be procedures or manuals or templates that help guide you through. What's going to guide you through in those situations, whether they're a health diagnosis that you didn't want to hear, a financial collapse, or a 9/11 type crisis. What's going to guide you through are the investments that you're making in yourself right now, in your mental, your moral, and your physical leadership DNA. And we'll unpack that in just a little bit about what I mean in each one of those areas. Now, for some people, when those crisis situations happen, they feel like the world is spinning out of control for them. Everything's happening so fast. But for others, everything slows down. And they're able to clearly see what they need to do, have the moral standing to do it, and the physical ability to carry it out. That's the person you want to be. That's a hero. Now, you've heard some definitions about what heroes are. This is my definition of it. Very simply put, it's someone who cultivates their mental, moral, and physical leadership DNA. They invest in themselves so that they can properly and responsibly respond to the paradigm shift or crisis situation. Now, for me, of course, like I said, that came to a head on 9/11 and then the next 4 days after it. Before I go too much further, let me take a quick poll. Let's do a quick vote here. How many of you can remember exactly where you were 13 years ago on 9/11, 2001? Wow, okay. I figure if you're over the age of 20, you can, but sometimes with high school or junior high children, they don't remember it quite as well. I certainly know where I was, but I want to give you a quick overview of 9/11 anyway, just so that everybody understands what happened, what occurred. 4 airplanes, all leaving from the East Coast, flying to the West Coast. Those airplanes were Boeing 757s or bigger, fueled to the max, and they contained 265 passengers and 19 terrorists. I could tell you about stories of most of those passengers, but there's two in particular I want to talk about. Two victims of 9/11 I want to talk about. And the first one is this individual here, Mr. Todd Beamer. Now, Todd is originally from the Flint area. I don't know if many of you know that. He was on Flight 93, which was hijacked by the terrorists and then later fought back for control by the passengers. He and his other fellow passengers had the presence of mind to make telephone calls from the plane, explaining what was going on during that hostage or the hijacking. In his last phone call, he was routed to a Verizon supervisor. Her name was Lisa Jefferson. He explained to Mrs. Jefferson what was going on the plane. And she explained to him that there were two planes earlier that day that were hijacked and crashed into the towers in New York City. Now, suddenly, Todd's paradigm shifted. He was told by the terrorists on the plane that if they just cooperated, everything was going to be fine. But upon receiving that news, the paradigm shifted completely, didn't it? Upon relaying that information to his fellow passengers, they knew what they had to do. They had to fight back for control of that plane. So he told Miss Jefferson that was what he was going to do. And then after saying the Lord's Prayer with her, he said these words. The last audible words of that phone conversation, that phone call, was a conversation he had with his fellow passengers. And he said these words. Gents, I think it's time to move. Are you ready? Let's roll. After what must have been an incredible struggle in the cockpit, the plane finally crashed in a field in Somerset, Pennsylvania. And while all 44 on board were killed, Todd and his fellow passengers succeeded in denying the terrorists the opportunity to use that plane as a weapon. And when you think about that mental, moral, and physical leadership DNA and courage that it took to take the actions that he and his fellow passengers took, he epitomizes that, in my opinion. He comes to, in my mind, as an American hero, a true hero. There's another person I want to talk about, another victim of 9/11. This lady, if I can get the slide to move, there we go. This lady, Miss Sheila Mooney, had just started her job at the Pentagon. In fact, September 10th was her first day on the job. She came home from work that day, and she was excited about her job, and she was excited to go back to work on the 11th. Of course, things would change quickly, because at 9:43, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. Now, the office that she was in was just a few meters from the point of the plane's impact. Of the 39 people in her office, 34 of them were killed instantly. She was badly burned. She was knocked about, began to come to about a minute or so later, and all best she could do was get to her knees. She could hear people moving around, but she couldn't speak. What happened next is an amazing and incredible story. What happened next will take your breath away and send goosebumps up and down your body. And I will share that with you tomorrow at the breakout session if you show up. Like I said, there were other stories of 9/11 that I could share with you, and I think you saw the video of the recovery of the Marine Corps flag. This is a photo of the Marine Corps flag, and you could see where it was perched up on the 4th floor of the Pentagon. I talk about it in my book, and I can tell you this, that while I was at the Pentagon, all 4 days there, I was challenged mentally, morally, and physically, and sometimes all at the same time. Let's unpack what I mean by mental, moral, and physical leadership. Very simply, your mental leadership or mental DNA is that ability for you to recognize the problem, the core of the problem, and then to begin formulating solutions, possible courses of action. It's a convergence of all your education, your experiences, the places, the people you've talked to, the books you've read. Being here today helps to serve to invest in your mental DNA. Moral DNA. Moral DNA is essentially that compass that exists within you that tells you what's right and what's wrong. It's what encourages you to make good decisions. It's convergence of maybe your religious experiences, spiritual experiences, ethical training that you've had. It all comes together and it tells you that the course of action you see as a solution is either right or wrong. And then that physical DNA. That physical DNA is just what it sounds like. It's your physical well-being. If you take the time to invest in yourself physically, when the crisis happens and you're feeling the stresses of it in your body, you won't succumb to the stresses. It requires you to make sure you get the proper sleep, the proper nutrition, the proper physical training. All of those things come to a convergence and make up your physical DNA. And those three elements, the mental, moral, and physical DNA, serve to define who you are in that crisis situation. Now, the takeaways are real simple. 3 simple tips to be able to shift with the paradigm and deal with the crisis situations. First one, invest in your mental DNA. Like I said, being here today, the books you read, the education you have, the interactions you have with people, the places you travel to, all serve to help enhance your mental acuity, your ability to recognize problems and possible solutions. The second one, investing in your physical DNA. You have to take the time to make sure you're getting proper rest, proper nutrition, going to the doctor when you're supposed to, and taking care of yourself physically, getting the training in and those types of things. Because, like I said, if you're not able, you can formulate the problem, formulate the solution, have the moral standing of knowing that it's the right thing to do, but if you aren't physically able to carry it out, what good is it? These 3 work together. And then finally, invest in your moral DNA. And this includes connecting with your community, your family, and your spiritual or ethical training endeavors. Now, I'm going to wrap it up by using the words of somebody we talked about earlier. I believe he is an American hero, and he is a Flint native. So I've laid out some steps, some basic path toward getting from here to there. The rest is up to you. The rest is up to all of us. Are you guys ready? Yes. Let's roll. Thank you.
Awesome.